Welcome to the Truth in Crime Case Files. Kathryn and Michael Avent, a couple whose lives seemed to epitomize the American dream. Married for over a decade, they had built a comfortable home filled with laughter, love, and the occasional chaos of their two young children. Kathryn, a dedicated elementary school teacher, was known for her nurturing spirit and infectious smile. She had a way of making everyone feel special, whether it was her students or the neighbors who often gathered for barbecues in their backyard. Michael, a successful landscape architect, was equally admired for his charm and work ethic. He was the type of husband who brought home flowers for Kathryn just because and made it a point to attend every soccer game and school play. Next door lived the Wilson family, Charlene and David, who had two children, Eric and Mia. Charlene, a stay-at-home mom, was the glue that held her family together, while David worked long hours as a software engineer. Eric, a bright and ambitious 17-year-old, was the apple of his parents' eye, excelling in academics and sports. Mia, his younger sister at 16, was a spirited teenager with dreams of becoming a writer. The two siblings shared a close bond, often seen laughing together in their front yard. The Avents and the Wilson family enjoyed a friendly relationship, often sharing meals and celebrating holidays together. On weekends, Michael and Eric would spend hours tending to their gardens, bonding over their shared love for plants and landscaping. It was during these weekends that a secret began to blossom, one that would shatter the lives of both families. On one particular Saturday, Kathryn hosted a barbecue, inviting the Wilson family over to celebrate the season. The two families mingled, sharing stories and laughter, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. While the adults chatted, Eric and Michael found themselves in the garden, planting new flowers and discussing their dreams for the future. Their friendship had grown deeper over the months, evolving into something neither of them had anticipated. What started as innocent gardening sessions turned into late-night conversations filled with laughter, shared secrets, and a growing attraction that neither could ignore. As the weeks passed, their bond intensified, and the lines between friendship and romance blurred. They began to meet in secret, stealing moments away from prying eyes. The thrill of their clandestine affair was intoxicating, but so was the fear of being discovered. Michael, a married man with children, felt torn between his responsibilities and the undeniable connection he felt with Eric. Meanwhile, Mia, who often roamed the neighborhood at night, began to notice the subtle changes in her brother. She sensed that something was amiss, that Eric was hiding something from her. The bond they shared had always been strong, and Mia prided herself on being able to read her brother like a book. It was during one of these late-night wanderings that she stumbled upon a scene that would change everything. One evening, Mia was searching for Eric, worried that he hadn't returned home. She ventured into the Avents' backyard, drawn by the soft glow of lights spilling from the windows. As she approached, she heard muffled laughter and whispers that sent a chill down her spine. Peering through the window, her heart sank as she witnessed the shocking sight of her brother and Michael entwined in a passionate embrace. The betrayal struck Mia like a bolt of lightning. Confusion and anger surged through her as she stumbled back, her mind racing with the implications of what she had just seen. How could her brother do this? How could Michael, a man she had always respected, betray her family in such a way? Torn between loyalty to her brother and the moral outrage of his actions, Mia felt the weight of the world pressing down on her. That night, she returned home, her heart heavy with the burden of knowledge. She lay awake, replaying the scene in her mind, feeling the walls of her once happy home closing in around her. The next morning, she resolved to confront Eric, determined to make him see the gravity of his actions. But the confrontation would never come. In a moment of desperation, Eric, terrified of losing everything, his relationship with Michael, his family, and the life he had known, made a choice that would seal Mia's fate. In a heated argument, fueled by fear and panic, he struck her down, shattering the fragile bonds of family and trust forever. As the clock struck 8, Charlene Wilson called out for her children, her voice echoing through their home. "Eric! Mia! Time for breakfast." She moved through the house, preparing pancakes and bacon, her heart light with the anticipation of a new day. But as she entered Mia's room, her heart sank. The door was ajar, and the room was eerily quiet. "Mia," Charlene called, pushing the door open. The sight that met her eyes was one of horror. Mia lay motionless on her bed, the sheets rumpled and stained with blood. A shattered vase lay on the floor, its pieces glinting ominously in the morning light. Panic surged through Charlene as she rushed to her daughter's side, shaking her gently. "Mia! Wake up! Please!" When Mia did not respond, Charlene screamed, her voice piercing the morning calm. David, hearing the commotion, rushed into the room, his expression turning from confusion to terror as he took in the scene. "What happened?" he shouted, his voice trembling as he knelt beside his wife. "Call 911. Charlene cried, her hands trembling as she clutched Mia's lifeless body. David quickly dialed for help, his heart pounding in his chest. The minutes felt like hours as they waited for the sirens to arrive, the reality of their daughter's death sinking in like a heavy stone. When the paramedics arrived, they quickly assessed the situation, but it was too late. Mia was pronounced dead at the scene. Detectives Lisa Reynolds and John Carter arrived shortly after, stepping into the chaos with grim determination. They began their investigation, interviewing the distraught parents and gathering evidence from the scene. The broken vase was a focal point, its shards scattered across the floor like a jigsaw puzzle waiting to be solved. Kathryn and Michael arrived at the scene, their faces pale and drawn. "What happened?" Kathryn asked, her voice trembling as she clutched Michael's arm. "Where's Mia?" David, still in shock, struggled to find the words. She's gone. She's dead," he finally managed, his voice breaking. Kathryn gasped, her hand flying to her mouth as tears filled her eyes. Michael stood frozen, his heart racing as he processed the gravity of the situation. As the investigation unfolded, the detectives began to piece together Mia's last known movements. They learned that she had been searching for Eric the night before, a fact that raised suspicions. Where was Eric? Why hadn't he come home? The detectives quickly turned their attention to him, hoping to find answers. Meanwhile, Eric sat in his room, consumed by guilt and fear. He had never intended for things to escalate the way they had. The confrontation with Mia had spiraled out of control, and now he was left with the weight of her death on his conscience. He knew he had to speak up, but the thought of revealing the truth about his relationship with Michael filled him with dread. As the day wore on, the detectives continued their investigation, interviewing neighbors and gathering evidence. They discovered that Mia had been seen leaving the house late at night, her expression troubled. With each revelation, the detectives felt the pieces of the puzzle coming together, but they still lacked a crucial element, the motive. Why would Eric harm his sister? The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. As night fell, the Avents returned home, their hearts heavy with grief. Kathryn couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The laughter and joy that had once filled their home felt like a distant memory. Michael, too, was haunted by the events of the day, his mind racing with thoughts of Mia and the secret he had tried so hard to keep hidden. Detective Reynolds, a seasoned investigator with a keen intuition, took the lead. She had seen her fair share of heart-wrenching cases, but the murder of a teenager struck a particularly painful chord. As she surveyed the crime scene, she noted the broken vase and the bloodstains on the floor, each detail a clue waiting to be unraveled. "John, we need to gather as much evidence as possible," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil swirling around them. "Let's start by interviewing the family and any neighbors who might have seen or heard something unusual." Detective Carter nodded, his expression serious. "I'll talk to the parents. You can check in with the neighbors." As they split up, Reynolds approached Charlene and David Wilson, who were still in shock, surrounded by family and friends offering their condolences. The couple looked lost, their eyes red from crying. "Mr. and Mrs. Wilson," Reynolds began gently, "I know this is a difficult time, but we need to ask you some questions about Mia's last moments. Anything you can tell us could help." David took a deep breath, his voice trembling. "Mia was fine yesterday. She was just being a typical teenager, hanging out with friends and working on her writing. She didn't mention anything unusual." Reynolds noted the tightness in his voice, sensing the underlying tension. "Did she seem upset or worried about anything?" Any fights with Eric? No, Charlene interjected, shaking her head. They were close. They had their disagreements, but nothing serious. I can't believe this is happening. As Reynolds listened, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was being left unsaid. She thanked the Wilson family and moved on to interview the neighbors, hoping to gather more information about Mia's final hours. Meanwhile, Detective Carter spoke with Eric, who had been brought in for questioning. The young man sat in the sterile interrogation room, his face pale and drawn. He was visibly shaken, his hands trembling as he fidgeted with the hem of his shirt. "Eric, we need to talk about last night," Carter said, his tone calm but firm. "Where were you when Mia was killed?" Eric's eyes widened, panic flashing across his face. "I was at home. I swear. I didn't do anything." Carter leaned forward, studying Eric's expression. "We just want to understand what happened. Your sister was looking for you. Did you see her?" Eric hesitated, his mind racing. I saw her before I went to bed. She was upset. She said she saw something she shouldn't have. I didn't think it was serious." "What do you mean?" Carter pressed, sensing a deeper issue at play. "I can't say. She said she wouldn't tell Mom and Dad, but I was scared. I didn't want her to say anything," Eric stammered, his voice breaking. "I was just trying to protect myself." Carter's instincts kicked in. "Protect yourself from what, Eric? What did she see?" Eric's eyes darted around the room, fear etched on his face. I can't tell you. You won't understand." The detective leaned back, frustration mounting. "Eric, if you don't tell us the truth, we can't help you. You need to be honest about what happened." As the questioning continued, Reynolds returned to the station, her mind racing with the information she had gathered. She reviewed the notes from her interviews, piecing together the timeline of events leading up to Mia's death. The broken vase, the blood, and Eric's cryptic statements began to form a troubling picture. Later that evening, the detectives convened to discuss their findings. "Eric's behavior is concerning," Reynolds said, her brow furrowed. "He's hiding something, and I can't shake the feeling that it's connected to Mia's death." Carter nodded, his expression serious. "We need to dig deeper into their relationship. If there was tension between them, it could explain why she was looking for him that night." As the investigation progressed, the detectives began to uncover layers of complexity in the family dynamics. They learned that Mia had been struggling with her brother's secretive behavior, and the bond that had once held the siblings together was now fraying at the edges. With each new piece of evidence, the detectives felt the weight of the case growing heavier. They were determined to find the truth, no matter how painful it might be. As the investigation into Mia Wilson's murder deepened, Detectives Lisa Reynolds and John Carter turned their focus to the primary suspects, Eric Wilson and Michael Avent. Each held a crucial piece of the puzzle, and the detectives needed to unravel the tangled web of relationships and secrets that surrounded them. Eric, still reeling from the loss of his sister, was an emotional wreck. During subsequent interviews, he struggled to maintain his composure, often breaking down at the mention of Mia. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," he would repeat, his voice choked with grief. But his evasive answers raised red flags for the detectives. "Eric, you need to be clear about what you saw," Reynolds urged during one session. "Mia was upset, and you were the last person she was with. What did she mean when she said she saw something she shouldn't have?" Eric's eyes darted around the room, fear evident on his face. "I can't tell you. I just wanted to protect myself." Meanwhile, Michael Avent's involvement in the affair with Eric complicated matters further. The detectives learned that Michael had been a father figure to Eric, but their relationship had shifted into something more intimate. This secret connection created a motive for Eric to protect Michael at all costs, even if it meant silencing Mia. Reynolds and Carter decided to confront Michael next. They needed to understand his perspective and how he fit into the timeline of events. When they arrived at the Avent household, Kathryn greeted them with a worried expression, sensing the gravity of their visit. "Is this about Mia?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Yes, we need to speak with Michael," Reynolds replied, her tone serious. As Michael entered the room, the tension was palpable. The detectives could see the weight of guilt etched on his face. "I didn't do anything wrong," he insisted, but the detectives knew that the truth was often hidden beneath layers of denial and fear. With both Eric and Michael under scrutiny, the detectives felt the pressure mounting. The pieces of the puzzle were slowly coming together, but the full picture remained obscured by secrets and lies. The investigation was far from over, and the truth was lurking just beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered. As the investigation into Mia Wilson's murder continued, detectives Lisa Reynolds and John Carter worked tirelessly to connect the dots. Their persistence paid off one afternoon when a crucial piece of evidence emerged from the forensic analysis of the crime scene. The broken vase, which had been identified as the murder weapon, was sent to the lab for testing. The results revealed traces of a rare fertilizer used exclusively in Michael Avent's landscaping business. This discovery sent shockwaves through the investigation, as it directly linked Michael to the scene of the crime. Reynolds and Carter convened to discuss the implications of this new evidence. "This could change everything," Carter said, his fingers tapping on the table nervously. "If Michael's fingerprints are on the vase, it could indicate he was there when Mia was killed." Reynolds nodded, her mind racing with possibilities. "We need to confront him with this evidence. If he was involved, we need to find out why." The detectives arranged to meet with Michael, who arrived looking visibly shaken. The atmosphere in the room was thick with tension as Reynolds laid out the evidence. "Michael, we've received forensic results that show your fingerprints on the vase found at the crime scene. Can you explain how that happened?" Michael's face paled, and he stammered, I don't know how that could be. I've never been in Mia's room." Reynolds pressed, "But you've been in her home, and you've been close to Eric. We need the truth, Michael. This is serious." As Michael struggled to maintain his composure, a flicker of fear crossed his face. The detectives could sense that the walls were closing in on him. "I never meant for any of this to happen," he finally admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. The confession hung in the air, heavy with implications. It was a breakthrough that could lead to the unraveling of the entire case. As the detectives pressed for more details, they knew they were on the cusp of uncovering the full truth behind Mia's tragic death. The tension in Maplewood reached a boiling point as detectives Lisa Reynolds and John Carter prepared to make an arrest. With Michael Avent's confession echoing in their minds, they knew they had enough evidence to charge him in connection with Mia Wilson's murder. The community, still reeling from the tragedy, awaited answers, and the detectives were determined to deliver justice. On a crisp autumn morning, the detectives arrived at the Avent household to execute the arrest. Kathryn, unaware of the impending storm, was in the kitchen preparing breakfast for her children. When the doorbell rang, she opened it to find Reynolds and Carter standing solemnly on her doorstep. "Kathryn, we need to speak with Michael," Reynolds said, her voice steady but compassionate. Kathryn's heart raced as she led the detectives inside. "Is everything okay?" Before she could receive an answer, Michael emerged from the hallway, his expression shifting from confusion to alarm as he saw the detectives. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice laced with anxiety. "Michael Avent, you are under arrest for the murder of Mia Wilson," Carter stated firmly, producing handcuffs. The room fell silent as the weight of the words settled in. Kathryn's face turned pale, and she staggered back, her hand flying to her mouth in shock. "What? No. This can't be happening." As the detectives escorted Michael out of the house, the reality of the situation began to sink in. The arrest sent shockwaves through the community, with neighbors gathering outside, their faces a mix of disbelief and outrage. The Avents had always been seen as the perfect family, and now, their facade was shattered. The trial was set to begin months later, drawing media attention from across the state. The courtroom was packed with spectators, eager to witness the proceedings. The prosecution presented a compelling case, highlighting Michael's affair with Eric and the motive behind the murder. They argued that Michael, fearing exposure and the destruction of his family, acted out of desperation when Mia threatened to reveal the truth. The defense, however, sought to paint a different narrative. They argued that Michael was not capable of such a heinous act, claiming that Mia's death was an unfortunate accident. They suggested that Eric, who had been hiding his relationship with Michael, was the true culprit, desperate to protect his brother from the fallout. As the trial progressed, emotions ran high. Kathryn sat in the courtroom, torn between her love for her husband and the horror of the accusations against him. Her heart ached as she listened to the testimonies, struggling to reconcile the man she loved with the monster the prosecution painted. After weeks of testimony and deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict. The courtroom held its breath as the judge read the decision: "We find the defendant, Michael Avent, guilty of second-degree murder." Gasps echoed through the room, and Kathryn's world crumbled around her. Michael was sentenced to 20 years in prison, a sentence that felt both too light and too heavy. The impact of the trial rippled through the community, leaving scars that would take years to heal. As the dust settled, the Wilson family was left to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives. Eric, grappling with the guilt of his sister's death and the role he played in the events that unfolded, faced his own demons. The affair that had once brought him joy now served as a painful reminder of the tragedy that had changed everything. In the aftermath, the residents of Maplewood were left to grapple with the harsh reality that even the most seemingly perfect lives could hide dark secrets, and the consequences of those secrets could be devastating. The story of Mia Wilson would linger in the hearts of many, a haunting reminder of the fragility of trust and the depths of betrayal. The verdict sent shockwaves through Maplewood. Michael Avent, once a beloved member of the community, was sentenced to 20 years in prison for the second-degree murder of Mia Wilson. The courtroom was filled with a heavy silence as the reality of the decision sank in, particularly for Kathryn, who felt her world crumble around her. In the months that followed, the Wilson family struggled to cope with their loss. Charlene and David found solace in each other but were haunted by the memories of their daughter. Eric, grappling with guilt and shame, withdrew from friends and family, burdened by the knowledge that his actions had contributed to Mia's tragic fate. The community, once vibrant and united, was fractured. Neighbors exchanged uneasy glances, the shadow of betrayal lingering in the air. Maplewood would never be the same, forever marked by the events that unfolded. As the seasons changed, the scars of the tragedy remained, a poignant reminder of the fragility of trust and the devastating consequences of hidden secrets. Mia's memory lived on in the hearts of those who loved her, a bittersweet legacy of a life taken too soon. A truth in crime case solvers. Interested in more real-life murder mysteries? Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. Do you have any thoughts about this case or have a case of your own you'd like us to investigate? Leave us a comment. Until then, stay safe.